we have got to talk about the Wheel of Time, which is dropping this week, starting this week at the very least. And I'm a big Wheel of Time fan. I read all the books many times actually, and I probably a bigger defender of the show than most. It's had mixed reactions over the course of its run. Many people thought the first season was, I think people were sort of like disappointed / intrigued by the first season for a while. The end of the first season happened, and people are like, actually, that wasn't that great. Season 2 comes along, people are like, this is way better. End of season 2, people are like, still, I don't know if I loved the end of season 2. There have been some previews for season 3. There's a lot of optimism here for season 3 of the show. I think that the highs of the Wheel of Time show are very high, and I'm very excited to see what they do with season 3. So we're going to do a little bit of a preview here on the Tastemakers podcast for season 3 of the Wheel of Time. Grace, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I liked the show. I think I've read the first 6 books in the series. So that's what I've read. So I've not finished the series. So I'm a little bit like, don't know where these characters are going. But I feel like I watched the first season of the show. Actually, I tried to start the show, was a little bit whatever with it, read the first book, and then went back and watched the full first season. So that's like sort of the show is the reason I got into the books. Like the fact that so many people, as the show is coming out, were excited by it is what got me to read the books. So that's sort of my connection. I actually like the show. I think the show is pretty good. I fully acknowledge that I don't have sort of the same hang-ups at other people. Like I almost wonder whether, like, if I continue to keep I want to read the whole series. If by the time I'm done and then I go back and start watching the show, maybe I'll be like, ooh, I don't like that, and I think a lot of the criticism is completely fair. There's like a thing that they do at the very beginning of the show with one of the characters, like where he's married and his wife died, and people didn't love that. I can sense that. I do think like it's an interesting place because Amazon both has all the money in the world to do it and also really love these like 8 episode seasons and really are like stuck with that. And so I think that, like, in my opinion, Rafe Judkins, creator of the show, probably gets more like hate. From everything I've read about him, he's such a huge fan of these books. It's not a project he took on because, to just for fun adapt this. I think he's a huge fan, and I think he is disappointed with stuff that he's had to choose to leave out. So yeah, I think the thing I felt like as season 2 was about to come out, I felt like people were going back to season 1 and being like, you know what, actually in retrospect, I think it works better. And I don't know that I've been hearing that about season 2 as much. I also felt like people were generally kinder to season 2 as it was going than they were to season 1.
It was pretty popular. There were a lot of people praising season 2. I was one of them, and I did find the ending to be a little lackluster, not for the reasons most people do. I think a lot of the criticism that I see is, I would say, not super fair. I would say a lot of it leans toward like just not liking women. But I do think there are fair criticisms to make, many of which I have made. However, I think the thing about season 3 as well is that it's the first season to really not be plagued by some kind of major issue like COVID for season 1 or the strike in season 2. And so, and on top of that, they had an actor change for season 2. They lost one of their main actors for the duration of season 2, who I believe is now back for season 3. So that's a separate issue than the change in actor from the other one. And so the special effects from the preview I've heard are very people really like them a lot. They're really intrigued by the intensity and the action of this preview. There's a lot of optimism, more optimism than I've seen for the Wheel of Time, I think, to this date. And I'm very, very interested to see where it goes in terms of adapting things. They are really getting into the meat of some of the best book content. And so
I agree with that.
There's a lot of anticipation and apprehension about getting to these sections. So I'm very excited. I'm very excited to see where we go with the Wheel of Time. I would recommend checking out the show in general if you like fantasy. If you have read the books, you've probably already watched it and decided whether or not you want to continue. If you haven't read the books, I would say specifically for you, don't take a lot of the criticisms you've heard to heart, because my understanding is most people who watch this show and really don't like it because they are big fans of the book. And most people who watch the show and aren't big fans of the book are able to approach it with a much more open mind, which is not meant as a defense of its method of adapting things. Personally, having read the books many times, I actually like a lot of the changes that they've made in terms of adapting things, but that is not a popular opinion. But if you haven't read these books, I would still recommend it. If you haven't read the books but are a fan of fantasy, I would recommend checking the show out, and I'm excited to see season 3.
I love the book. The books, they're long books, but I feel like they're extremely well written. And like if you do that, if you go read the books, you watch this, whatever order you do that in, I think you'll be pleasantly. I think you'll enjoy yourself. So I think the books are just extremely good. But I think, and I think we're where we're the covering around this in terms of like you and I would not be talking about season 3 of the Wheel of Time if we didn't like what we have seen so far. And so I just put that on the radar to say, if you're going to write us in feedback or send us things, I think that we are happy to be critical of the show and definitely will be critical of the show when we don't like something that's happening. But in terms of like the long-standing issue, the things that I think, just to echo your point, Taran, the things that people tend to not like about it, I don't know that I sit in that same sentiment. This to me feels extremely like The Acolyte, where it was like, oh, the things that people are complaining about are not actually the things that I'm not jiving with the show. And so and it's not that you can't write in and say something about something you don't like about the show, just being mindful of the type of criticism that we'll be engaging with throughout the show.
If you're looking to hear, because we will be covering season 3, very excited to do so. It will be the two of us all season long. And I also back in season 1, I was doing YouTube video analysis of each episode, which I had a lot of fun with. So I'm excited to talk about season 3. But we are definitely not the people. If you're looking for like people to be shouting from the rooftops about how they're not giving the male characters enough cool moments, that's probably not something that I'm going to be super critical of.
Well, I do that, but Jess edits it out every episode. She edits all my complaining about the male characters not getting enough attention. I'll say, I believe my review embargo's up. I've watched the first 3 episodes of this new season already, and I liked it a fair bit. I think it's pretty good. Again, I feel like I hesitate to say that only, I know like people are listening to me and I'm reviewing things, but I'm hesitant because I'm not so Wheel of Time like I haven't read the whole series. So in terms of like, but I know what this, I know specifically which book. I've read the book that this series is adapting, and I've read past that as well. I think it's good. The other piece of it that I think, to me, listening to Rosamund Pike talk about the show, she's an executive producer on the show. She has read all of it. She narrates all the audiobooks now. You can buy them with Rosamund Pike's narration.
She hasn't gotten through all of them yet, but she is working her way.
She knows this stuff, and she's also in there. And I know obviously she's invested in the show being successful and is bringing that mindset. But like, if you listen to her talk, she really understands this show in a way that I think Rafe does too. I'm very excited for this season. And yeah, 3 episodes dropping on March 13th, and then weekly from there. It'll actually be a little bit of a short run because it only runs till April 17th. 8 episode series with 3 episodes to start with. So, which will be quite a lot for us to get through, but we'll do those in one podcast, I presume. I feel like that's the way to go. We'll assume you've watched all 3 episodes when we recap week 1 of the Wheel of Time.
Yeah. So stay tuned for that. I think for me, coming from the perspective of the book, again, I grew up on these books. They were some of my first early fantasy reads. And the reason I've read the series many times is that for a while I was like rereading the entire series every time a new book came out. And that's so necessary because I have consistently forgotten what has happened in this series so many times. But what I particularly like about the show versus the books is that it breathes new life into characterization for me. Something I didn't love about the books is that even though there is a lot of development over time, I don't love the way in which Robert Jordan explores his characters' motivations and thoughts and development as much as the show actually does. And that might be controversial to some, but I really enjoy the way that the show digs deeper into things like the trauma of the experiences that these people are having and the grief and so on and so forth in terms of just exploring their characters. So really excited for season 3 of Wheel of Time. We will be talking about it, and if you want to join us, you can do so. But I would recommend catching up if you haven't, because it will probably be pretty hard to start at season 3.
Yeah, I mean, for what I've seen as well, and this isn't a spoiler, but everyone's going to sort of start together based on where the end of season 2 happens. Like most of our characters are going to be in one location, which is very fun. That there are sort of the dynamics between all of it's such a ginormous cast. It's a huge cast. All of those people before events happen that like spread everybody to where they're going on this epic fantasy adventure. There's a lot of teasing. When I was talking with I interviewed the cast, that article should come out if it's not out already. A lot of teasing. They all get like very excited about things that are coming in terms of like new Forsaken or things that are happening in the show. So I'm pretty excited to be chatting about it with you each week, Taran.
All right. Well, that's what we have for you for the Wheel of Time then.
We will be covering the Wheel of Time.
Where can people find those podcasts?
On WeKnowScriptedTV.com, on our YouTube channel, or also if you're subscribed to the specific We Know Wheel of Time feed, which is the rebranded Lord of the Rings podcast feed. You can find that as well.
That's what we have for you. Thank you all so much for joining us here today, and we will see all of you next time.